guide our leaders in all that they do in the interest of the people of Jamaica. Amen.
Thank you. First, welcome everyone, and say, in a new atmosphere, keeping safe. It's a little sneeze bar. And just, we're here to look at the Zones of Special Operations legislation. Before I go there, I think we have a committee of 15 members. I guess the quorum is as small as 4, so I hope we can keep them steady. Yeah, all right. Yeah, I'm taking out the mask. I think we are, with the new situation, the sneeze screen, we're supposed to be quite safe. Then welcome everyone. I think we're only missing 2 members. Member Philip Paulwell from East Kingston and Senator Charles Sinclair from Montego Bay. And particularly welcome I won't say it's a new committee, but I think a number of teams there will work together on another piece of legislation. I call it my committee. Built up a very good rapport. Senator Scott Monte said it. And now MP Carencia joined the team, and Mr. Jackson. But Lambert, we want to welcome. We have a lot of you in the Senate, so good to have you here with us down here. Right. And to all the other new members, Ms. Golding Campbell, Senate Minister Matt Samuda, and of course, again, Mr. Donald Williams, another attorney at law from the corporate area. This morning meeting, we have apologies about both of the individuals, from both Mr. Powell and Mr. Sinclair. I think the others have indicated they might be here. Ms. Mallow Ford told me she's on the way, and so is Mr. Chuck. Tends to be on the way a lot of times, but he's reliable. All right. This morning, what I'm going to do is, in addition to welcome, is look at our procedures going forward for this review after my opening remarks. Of course, I said we are looking at the law for Zones of Special Operations, Special Security, and Community Development Measures Act 2017. One of the more impactful pieces of legislation which sought to create a legal framework for intervention in communities in a particular way. So essentially, it's a development order based on stronger security measures. In other words, improve public safety and then set about work that is designed to bring about permanent, sustainable changes within the community. We have had 4 declared so far, and we are looking at the results of this impact in these areas and then examine what may be required what changes could be required in legislation to improve on what we have. It was in 2017 the Parliament promulgated the Zone of Special Operation, targeting communities, vulnerable communities or zones that have demonstrated a high propensity of and prevalence of criminal activities, as well as grave infrastructure and social deprivation. To date, Parliament has really approved the establishment of 4 zones. They are the communities of Mount Salem and Denham Town, both about 3 years old, and in recent times, August Town and Greenwich Town. There have been some very positive impacts identified in these areas, but we do have another 18 or so communities that have to be examined for the possibility of introduction of these kind of activity, and we hope we'll get the legislation in a frame that we feel comfortable moving on with. Of course, the review was part of the original legislation, required that the act be reviewed from time to time by a committee of both houses appointed for that purpose. Hence this joint select committee today of 15 members, of both members of the Senate and the lower house, to give us an insight into what the impact has been out there. We hope it won't take too long, but we'll consider a presentation from both the Jamaica Defense Force, the Conservative Force, the various civil society groups, and hopefully some residents from the Zones of Special Operation, both those currently in place and others who might be expecting to have them and qualify for that, for the Zones of Special Operation. And we'll be advertising and hope we'll get some responses from institutions like the churches who operate in these areas and other community groups that are based there. In seeking to address the historical and social, cultural, and economic underpinnings of crime, it's critical to our successful and sustained reduction of crime that we have the required legislative framework in which to operate. The government has certainly been strategic in utilizing the state of public emergency to stop the bloodletting and thereby providing a reprieve for the people while simultaneously mainstreaming and repositioning social intervention through the zones of special operation for increased efficiency and sustained impact and real change. We have to consider and address crime in a holistic manner. The work of this Joint Select Committee is part of the overarching plan to ensure an effective response to criminality in Jamaica. As we enter the year this season, we remain vigilant in our fight against COVID-19 pandemic, and I must make an appeal to all my fellow Jamaicans to exercise vigilance as you go about your activities. The police have intensified the intense activity across the island and will not only continue to enforce the disaster risk management protocol. These operations are geared toward reducing violence, crime, while improving public safety. We all have a role and responsibility in safeguarding ourselves, our families, and our communities. There is a tendency in our society to resort to violence for resolving simplest of matters that has now escalated the use of contract killing as a matter of resolving feuds. As a society, we must strongly and collectively condemn that sort of behavior. We have initiated a number of social marketing programs, but we are always open to new ideas as we seek to target those who are perpetrators, but not only perpetrators of violence, but those who are themselves organizers, as well as to increase the sensitivity of the public. Hence, the program, while it is being marketed through the various formal media, involved reaching into the communities and the social media, but I thought it would be good to get in the formal media because I think there's still too much of a lack of, how would I say, a low sensitivity to the severe violence in our society by some of us. We have been given the opportunity to consider and review our country's most important, one of our country's most important crime prevention and reduction tools. As we consult and deliberate, we must be mindful of the direct and life-altering implications of our decision. Crime and violence is an epidemic that has lasted decades in our country. The law reform, zones of special operations, special security, and community development measures act that tried and proven element of our plan to secure Jamaica, which we must now review and ensure we come out of here with an even better piece of legislation. We'll, of course, look to not only your experience, but we're inviting members of the wider society, as I said, the Office of the Director for government institutions, as well as the wider society, like DPP, the Law School, JAMBAR, JSCF, JDF, Jamaicans, NGOs, Office of the Public Defender, and others who have a particular interest in how successful they are. In going forward, we'll of course publish a public notice, but I want to suggest and I'll be guided, but I suggest we do that after the holiday season. Public notice over the holiday season get lost in all the other advertisement. Again, let me welcome everyone, and we'll discuss how we could begin by deciding what a quorum is. We have 15 members. What's the suggestion? Oh, I need to meet, sorry. The members are, in addition to those who apologize, myself as chairman, Honorable Delroy Chuck, member of QCMP, and the Minister of Justice, Mrs. Marlene Malou Fort, or Attorney General and MP, Ms. Currency Morris, MP, Mr. Donovan Williams, MP, Mr. Robert Miller, MP, Mr. Fitzjackson, CD MP, Mr. Philip Paul, CD MP, Senator the Honorable Matthew Samuda, Senator Charles Sinclair, Senator Shireen Golding Campbell, Senator Donna Scott Motley, and Senator Lambert Brown. Yeah. I think 2, 4, 13, sorry. I counted the 2 absentees twice. 2 apologies. What is a quorum? What? 5? 3? 4? What's view will get?
I think 5 is a reasonable number, having regard to the size of the committee. And we also want to have as full participation from the committee as possible. Though we know from past experience that we have often struggled for a quorum in these committee meetings.
Yes. Get the edgy to go ahead. All right. Excluding, no, including the chairman.
Including the chairman.
5 including the chair, okay. That sounds good. We want as much participation as we can in this particular discussion. And we know we have had a challenge, but we have a number of our AG, we have a number of our faithful supporters from the anti-gang here, so we should keep it in. And I am sure, right.
Where are we, Chairman, at quorum or?
Yeah, quorum, we have
So we
accepted
agree on the
5.
quorum?
Now, in terms of public notice,
Yes.
we will send out public notice. I'm suggesting we do that after the holiday period, because if we do it now, it get lost in all the shopping ads and so forth.
No, okay. I have no problem, Chairman, with the public notice. I think we have going now 4 ZOSOs, right? I think it's important for us to get perhaps a number of persons from each of these, the leaders or just ordinary persons from Mount Salem, Denhamtown, Augustown, to come here, if possible, and indicate to us what they think were the shortcomings of the ZOSO, the successes of the ZOSO, how they feel. In other words, let us get a feedback from those persons who were on the ground. I mean, that's the residents, if they would be happy to come here and, indicate to us so we can have a better idea how we move forward in terms of other ZOSOs. So all the shortcomings we can try to resolve. All the successes we replicate. I'm also, Chairman, going to ask that we put in place a presentation from the Ministry of Justice, the Restorative Justice team, to explain how restorative justice should be used in each of these ZOSOs. We have been using it in many communities, in Denhamtown and Tivoli in particular, where it has been a great success. I have said, and I've asked her that I can repeat, Ms. Daphne Hurge, many people know Ms. Daphne Hurge, who was once executive director of the National Solid Waste. She just told me, because of age and health, she was the liaison officer for both Tivoli and Denhamtown. And in speaking to her, she said, this is restorative justice in the best program she has ever seen in her lifetime, because it brought disputes to a healing process where persons who were in great dispute in Denhamtown and Tivoli were able to resolve their dispute and shake hands afterwards. So I know, in fact, recently Greenwich Town asked for this, and I actually went to the Greenwich Town Community Center to deal with a number of the persons, and they're asking for more of this in Greenwich Town. So what I'm saying, Chairman, I would like the restorative justice for a short presentation to say how it can operate in these ZOSOs to really resolve some of the conflicts that usually arise in these communities.
Not too long of a time, but we do want presentation from all the relevant government agencies, as well as members of the community, both regular citizens who have been exposed, especially in the long-standing ones like Mount Salem and Denhamtown, as well as established citizens like churches and other groupings that are identified in the community, give us a genuine feedback on it. Certainly beyond that, but the AG.
Thank you, Chairman. Following on the Honorable Minister of Justice's intervention, perhaps it would be helpful for us to look on the 2 sides of the zone, the security operations side, and get perspectives from the joint force on how that has been, how the provisions of the law have assisted or hindered the kinds of operations that are required for to achieve the goals of the law. And then to also hear from the social intervention committees, which would include the agencies of government. But I can say from my own experience with the Mount Salem zone that very often the high decision makers that have been named to the committee and were named for a particular reason to ensure that decisions required to be taken could be taken in a timely way, were not attending, and instead were sending lower level officials who were not authorized to take decisions, and matters were not dealt with as expeditiously. And I think that is a feature that we find across government, where the design is to ensure that a particular level is represented to enable quick and effective decision making, but the work seemed to be relegated to side work instead of part of the core functions, particularly of the permanent secretaries.
Contribution, AG, and I want to reinforce that before I take Mr. Brown, because this has been one of the primary problems. There are two sides. The security forces have been involved in all of aspects of anything to do with security, and it may suit us to structure that we take them first and then stimulate to get the others down the road. We have listed here a number of them. And as I said, you'd have noticed that on the last week I had to call a meeting of the high-level people for the West Kingston zone. It was essential to get them to begin to do the work they should do. Now, unless the individuals on that side of the plan operate, we will not succeed. And I think we got some effort in Mount St. It's smaller, but we have a challenge getting the agents of government getting into the area and committing to do the work in terms of intervening and correcting the social services that the community is exposed to. Joseph, of course, will be a key representative in all of this. Anyway, Senator Brown, before we...
Thank you, Chairman. I share the view that the citizens from the communities under the ZOSO should be invited. And I'd love to see a free invitation to all who may want to come. Me in making my contribution here.
I have to ask all the questions. That's what the purpose of the committee is. Interrogate this entire process thoroughly and come out of it with what works well, what needs to be changed, and what needs to be added. The only one thing I mentioned, Senator, bear in mind the ZOSOs, there's sometimes a bit of a conflict in the public's mind between ZOSO and state of public emergency. They're quite separate events, and those are in geographically defined areas. But certainly would like the citizens from the area, both the citizen leadership as well as just average citizen who has had the experience coming in to talk, especially, I said, from the two that have been there now for some 3 years, Mount Salem and Denham Town. And we have had I'd say Mount Salem has some outstanding results. The results in Denham Town is mixed, as indicated by the Restorative Justice Program, and that's one we need to take a close look at, because we move into the difficult areas. Well, we are moving into Greenwich Town now. We need to look at it and ensure we can apply, as I said, the best practices and get results there. And then if we should take a look at we're going to do a general public notice.
Sorry, Chairman, just...
Go ahead.
Are we also going to be getting... I know there are reports at times of renewal in the House. But are we going to be getting information as to the cost? Because I believe I heard you said recently that the ZOSOs are more expensive in terms of resources being expended, manpower included, than the SOEs. And so it would be good if we could get a sense of the costs as well. So we can look at the effectiveness and the productivity of the measure, because it's a measure so far that has been limited to 4 of whatever number of communities. There's a view which says there could be 20 or more, but there's some who feel there should be more. So what is it that has limited it to 4? Is it cost? Is it manpower? Certainly not the need for it. So if we could get that type of information coming to us, again, that would be useful in assisting the contribution that we may make to the extent that we are still in the committee.
Certainly, Senator, I think, in fact, I'd go even a bit further and ask the PIOJ to give us a short presentation on how they came to what was considered the 100 most significantly socioeconomically deprived communities in Jamaica. And out of that flowed 20 kind of variable plus or minus 2, which have the most severe conditions, severe level of deficiency in social and economic infrastructure. And it is that 20 that we're still working on. That list was derived some almost 10 years ago and is still valid. But we will get up-to-date data. Then we'll look at the 2 programs, because the SO is principally a security operation. I mean, we sometimes get in concept, it's strictly security, disrupt the gangs and stop the killing in that particular area for the time required to build out effective police response. The ZOSOs are essentially security-based development programs and have a longer time. We have, I can say, at a policy level, and we'd go to get the numbers so you can, for yourself, recommend and decide. We have not expanded beyond 4 because we don't want to dilute the program itself and then destroy the brand, so to speak, because it definitely has a budget. In the security operation, you're dealing with the policing and so on and what they cost. The build phase of the program must be included, otherwise we'll not have the impact we want, which is dealing with the infrastructure of whether roads, housing, sewage, water, along with what I consider even the most critical element of it is to provide the poor people in these communities with quality services. Because these are the areas that have the worst public service in terms of health services, education in particular, and oftentimes they are the one most in need of what we'd call our own social safety net, which is the social, and they don't get access to it. As I quoted in my presentation yesterday, you went into Greenwich Town and found that the level of immunization is below 40%. This is unheard of in Jamaica today. In public health before, you normally expect at least 70% and you get it up. The schools, I mean, it has some, in a state of disrepair, the outcome normally you do, and we should get those statistics for the committee. But I would monitor the grade 4 achievement test, which is a good indication of what's happening in the school. And they were like 35–40% literacy and numeracy at that level. Once you have that, you're on a road of no return. You go into a school like one in Greenwich Town, the high school. You find that, first of all, you find only boys going there, because the girls do well and they send them out. And the only person who go into a school are the ones who cannot get to go outside. When we talk to those who get sent to a Haile Selassie or Norman Manley, and I have a discussion with them in our summer school, they tell you straight up front, they want to go Excelsior or Georges. And if they get stuck there, you know where they're heading. What we have to do is to change the school. You can't send everybody out. And part of the program there is to ensure that the agencies of government respond by bringing quality service. And that has been the challenge, and hopefully out of this dialogue and whatever change we make in the legislation, I must indicate, before I take you, Member Jackson, is that the Citizen Security Secretariat is now set up. Their role is principally to coordinate activities that the MDAs, the agencies of government, do put the resources in these areas. It's not just project funding we're talking. When you hit a school, the resources deal with the school to bring it up to standards in a sustainable manner. It needs a Ministry of Education to respond. So the City Security Program Secretariat should come at the later stage, because their role is to begin to ensure that what we say in the initiating a ZOSO is carried out in the association with JSIF. Right? JSF does a pretty good job on the physical infrastructure side. They get in water, roads, sewer. Housing a bit of a short of a problem they will have to work out. But the social services side has been a major weakness. So that's...
Thank you, Minister. Chairman. Further to the point, well, I take note of those comments you just made, they're pertinent to the point I want to raise. And also further to what Senator Brown indicated. What I would like to be determined, if it has not yet been so done, is for there to be established some quantitative and qualitative measure that will determine when a ZOSO comes to an end. For me, it seems kind of arbitrary, highly subjective. There is an objective situation that caused the ZOSO to come into being. And I remember in the debate of the first ZOSO, some physical conditions, much of what you mentioned a while ago, were identified in these communities. But there are many other communities that we could call near ZOSO worthy communities. The infrastructure, low levels of education, low level of attendance at school, level of criminal activities in the areas, etc. There are many other communities who might not reach there but close to it. But in the absence of some quantitative measure, right, we can't determine, one, indicate what pre-ZOSO intervention that need to be made to prevent a ZOSO having to be declared at some stage. And two, when you are in there, what is it that determines when it comes to an end? You mentioned about the coordinating role of these agency. Chairman, one of the difficulties we have across agencies and different situations in the country, agencies are given certain authority, a certain function, but they lack the authority either to command the resources or to command the action or actions that need to be taken to cause the desired outcome. And if we treat this as a security matter, in my mind, as a matter of urgency, then all other things have to fall behind rather than they struggle with everything else.
Thank you, Member Jackson. I think we are having the right discussion, and I see how we can ensure the legislature will assist us in ensuring we get this change, because one of the things that have been lacking a lot of these is even this, what you call the baseline data. It's still inadequate how we go in. Most of what we have used up to now is the security data. The 100 communities has some original data that the PIOJ has done, and they have themselves through their, what is a small project, should have been bigger, community renewal program, data on most of these communities. I think we'll have to ensure that when we are going to a year for zones, we get all the baseline data known. In fact, it's maybe we're at a good time in discussing it, because they move toward the sixth security plan in a structured way just done, and we have that, should have publicized the structure. The business, what is called the business implementation group, I think it is, my staff is here, is actually the permanent secretary board. So the secretary or the head of the security secretariat, CSP, is the former permanent secretary in the ministry, to get someone at the level who can actually attend public permanent secretary board and in fact ensure that they monitor the program at that level. So the first step, the first change we are doing in that context, which will for all the areas, but we'll need a specific reference to those, is to establish baseline data and everything, not just security, but all the quality data that affects the lives of individuals, ranging from the standard of education, quality in healthcare, skill set, training, nutritional levels, a number of parameters which the professionals will outline. So you'll have a full data set, socio-demographic data on the community. It not only gives you time to withdraw, but we can then monitor the quality of the work being done in the community. You know, you're not going to expect the nutritional status to remain static for 4 years and then come good and you pull out. You can measure those parameters on an ongoing basis, which is what the Secretariat is supposed to do, and pull up the relevant agency. So there'll be a room for that kind of activity, and hopefully, well, what we hope I'd like us to do with the legislation is to make sure that the legislation put in place a stronger legal framework to hold the agencies accountable for this. Bear in mind, a lot of the funding now coming, which we had earlier discussion on how it should be operated, it no longer comes as a project. So we had as a flagship project, the City Security and Justice Program. Everybody asked what's the successor to that. The funds coming through partners and the government of Jamaica as well will go to the ministries. And the minister expected to call for the budget item to get into the community. So whether it is education or health or security, whatever is coming, especially on the social service side, JSIF and the relevant agencies are supposed to pull the money in the budget to that area. The City Security Secretariat is supposed to monitor that, and that's why we'll have to hold them accountable. Now, that has been the big problem, where the projects come in, do some work, and then go, and some of the public servants feel somewhat sidelined, because the project officers usually earn twice what the formal government agencies work. So the social worker from JSF gets twice what SDC worker gets, or the Ministry of Labor and Social Security worker gets. And Ministry of Education just do their normal program. To what extent the legislation can assist in ensuring these things are done, we'll have to examine that. But that's the approach which we have to look at, to hold the MDAs, as we call them, accountable in really bringing better quality service to these communities. Ultimately, that's what will make the difference. And we're certainly in agreement on that, is how we're going to work it out. The very sitting of the committee in review will certainly help to identify and bring to the public's attention. And what we'll have to say, if can we use the legislation to tighten to hold them more accountable. In addition to the database, which will be monitored continuously, and we are doing some stuff too. We are inviting, well, Professor Harriet has made a submission, and we're looking at having him review what has been done in the academic way as well, and see, to look at progress and withdrawal procedure. After database, which is an aspect of our intervention program, has been criticized by everyone, including Capri. We correct that, the other section of it, in terms of how fast we move is budget. Because what we cannot afford to do with the program is to dilute it to a point where it loses impact. So we need to go into all 20 communities. And the restraining factors there are two things. One, first we need to have the security base to ensure that the work we do is based on public safety as a result of the action of the state. So the policing operation is crucial, must be conducted in a manner to win the trust of the community, but also separate the poor people in the community, humble people in the community, from dependency and generous gangs. We are very much aware about those of us who have conscience like that, and pretty much every Jamaican. There are a lot of what they call benevolent dons in communities. They may be brutal in taking disciplinary matters, but they will ensure funds reach for lunch money, and they'll abuse them, the girls at a later stage. They will have back-to-school treats. They'll do all kinds of things to reinforce their own goodwill while exploiting the community. Peace and safety must come from the work of the police. And there has been effort to train them to provide that in a way that will win trust in the community. The numbers of officers we have, of course, limits that, because really intense policing over time to ensure that the members of the community feel safe talking to the police and to the wider agencies of government, because the informed for dead culture is real. People in the community not only feel hurt and disrespect the community police, but they are afraid to talk to the police, not only because of the police, but what the consequences are. We have to ensure that they feel safe. We have to ensure they feel safe going to school because two communities are at war. So the security element plays a role. The police can inform on the JDF on their recruitment plan as they move forward to try and expand the numbers to provide that base. And then the budget must be there to ensure that the infrastructure, physical and fiscal and human, can be addressed. So those are two things, but we can get information on that, or we have to get the information on what it costs where. No two committees cost the same. Look at how it's being done, and hopefully we can come up with I'm optimistic we'll come up with a formula that will begin to address this chronic endemic problem in the community.
Chair, just to be clear,
Where
the idea that I understand of ZOSO
Go ahead.
was to clear, hold, and build. So, will we be able to disaggregate these phases and to get a sense of how well have we done in these 4 areas, in clearing, holding? How much of what you just said a while ago about ensuring that the security forces are the influencers. So if we can disaggregate these phases in the reports that come to us, so we get a sense of the success of clearing, holding, and where we are in the building process. So whoever presents to us needs to take that into account.
That sounds like a JSIF report. A JSIF is still the point agency up to now. The broadening to include education on a more intense scale is come on the CSP program and the budget arrangement. But up to now, the JSIF maybe was the primary individual with dedicated money to these areas. So they have been leading the way and can certainly give an idea of how the 3 phases go, along with the police and the JDF.
But JSIF wouldn't be part of the clearing.
At the very beginning, they start the planning during the clearing. So the JCF and the JDF have to give the overall picture because there's overlapping roads. So they'll have to give the cost of clearing and what happens during clearing. But while they're clearing, JCF is also planning and they start the process because the two things kind of go together because when you start to remove zinc fence, for example, you'll do it as quickly as possible to begin to get engagement publicly. So the agencies you'll be dealing with, they are primarily JCF for the medium term and the police and the military in the beginning, and how they operate. But certainly it's really a good concept, and I agree, to get them early on to look at what happens in all 3 phases. In the build phase, you begin to look at withdrawal. So in the case of a Mount Salem, where we maybe have the better results, you're building a new police station. So when the special teams move out, there'll be a sense of a police station properly equipped and have resource to the level to deal with maintaining safety in the community. AG, you're here today as in 2 caps. You're wearing 2 caps now. I'll put that one.
Yes.
You're the member of Parliament of the first zones declared,
Yes.
and you're the Attorney General.
Yes, Chairman. Just to go back to the actual review of the law, much discussion during the times of bringing the resolutions for extension of the zone turned on which areas should be zones. Members of the House asking for communities in their constituencies to be declared. You would recall that when the criteria for declaration was set, the criteria pretty much mirrored what is contained at Section 20 of the Constitution. And perhaps we may want to look at the set criteria for declaration. point has been raised that the law does not set out criteria for ending of the zone. And I think that's a deficiency in the law as it is in the Constitution. And
the Constitution.
right. So in terms of matters specifically for review, with the aim of strengthening the legislation in this critical area. So we have Section 4. We have the revocation at Section 7. We want to give some thought to that and criteria for revocation. And we would perhaps want to hear from the security forces and persons, just perspectives on that. Extension, well, the duration, to the extent that this is supposed to be a more medium to long-term measure for building. The idea was that with the intelligence from the security forces on where the hot spots, the hot criminal spots were, zone by zone, we could begin the work of rebuilding the nation, not only dealing with hard policing and security measures, but also the necessary developmental issues. Hence the model of the community development alongside the security operations. But also want to hear how the actual administration, so we have, for example, a recommendation of the Joint Command to the Prime Minister, yet we know that it is the head of the security forces that would actually be in the National Security Council. So there are some practical things, I think, from which we could get some feedback to see what changes, if any, ought to be made in the law. And then we also look on the suite of powers exercisable by the joint force within the zone. We would want to hear something on that too. I believe we may have to consider, so we see detailing of the security side of the zone, but not so much in respect of the social intervention side. And perhaps we would want to give some thought to whether or not more things need to be put. The law empowers the minister to make regs. None so far have been made under the law. What, if anything, should be put from the experiences we have had in respect of the operations, and just generally to see how we go forward. But at the end of the day, is to, having regard to the experience we have had over the past 3 years since the law was enacted, how we may improve on it to achieve the security and development goals that have been set.
That sounds like we need a submission from the Attorney General's Department, a fulsome submission.
So I think you're perfectly correct. And there are some minor practical issues like the frequency of reporting, and maybe that there should be changes in that in terms of the phase you're in as well. Because in the build phase, 60 days become an issue. But how you withdraw is another challenge. But again, this is where the budget will play a role, because, you know, the JSIF had a program which overlapped in this, which dealt with the non-security side. The Inner City Basic Service Program, which very few people have been very sensitive to, was a project that was designed to do a lot of the things we are talking about here in terms of social intervention. And they have operated in one of my districts for the last nearly 20 years. So we need to look at it, and part of what we have to do is lay out the dateline, the database, lay out the baseline data, then decide how, you know, what the progress is being made and what the outcomes you expect and in what time. Or we could end up with an unending process before we get to normalcy. So we set some timelines, set some outcomes. And I think this was brought in and accepted by this as one of those years that we need a security foundation to provide public safety and good order. Then you add the work to it or complement it with the ongoing work program, which the Inner City Basic Services did quite an excellent job of. But in many cases, you didn't have much change in terms of the social dysfunction in the community, put it mildly. Any comments from the new members?
Chairman, I meant to have
the
said
AG
one
give us a
other
full
thing.
review.
I don't mean to. You had expressed the view as to whether the invitations for submission should be made over the Christmas. I do agree with you that in the hustle and bustle of the season, the notice may get lost. But I just wonder, for those who may just see it, whether it may give them some time to begin their preparation and then another notice be issued. So more than one be issued. One now and then another one as a timely reminder. So it would give those who would be earning, who know that the review is taking place and are interested in making submissions, an opportunity to begin their preparation.
We're going to add to it. We're going to send letters to all the people who we expect to come, the formal ones, like the JCF, the JDF, Jambar, Law School, JCF, the CSP Secretary, DP, all a long list of those government agencies. I could go as a Jamaican for just some established NGOs, Office of the Public Defender as well, DPP, and other groups that are clearly identified. Then we put a general notice. It could be used to put a general that the law is being reviewed now, just to notify them rather than ask a specific thing, and they could begin to consider it. We could do that and make it very general at the outset. But all the institutions that we expect from would be written to know, because we expect them to have the kind of institutional.
The first schedule, Chairman, just by way of reminder, and I know you had alluded to it, lists the persons who comprise the committee, and certainly within each category. I know the view was expressed not to limit to those we want to hear from, but there are categories of persons that are listed there. And that was designed for a specific reason, cross-cutting to ensure that all major players who would have a role in rebuilding a community that has been torn by violence and has been neglected on the development side would be present at the table making a contribution to the rebuilding.
Chairman, I think the Honorable AG came in after your opening submission. Well, yeah, because I think he cited a number. But while Jambar is being invited, there's a subset of lawyers called the Cornwall Bar, and they'll be closer to Mount Salem. Maybe we want to add them to the list if I don't recall them being on your list, yes.
Chairman, that's there's a consideration which we haven't looked at these joint select to ask people to come from Montego Bay, Mount Salem, or even the lawyers. Could we at least have a virtual meeting for presenters from the West, even though the committee members should be here, but at least we could easily, we can set it up so that say the people on the ground in Mount Salem, we could put them to maybe the Justice Center or anywhere for them to make their presentation rather than have to travel all the way from Mount Salem to here. And this could be so generally, those persons who feel more comfortable being in their community to make the presentation, and we can always take it here. So can we look at that possibility, Chairman?
Certainly, not a bad idea. Just bear in mind one thing, what I find with and I'll certainly follow through on this, but as I said, there's a caution. Really. I find what you don't want to do is we use radio calling shows the nearest thing to kind of virtual thing. And there are people who use them as a platform, not so much for a positive contributor, but just to exponential. And it's difficult to deal with that
you can control it from here, Chairman.
Just bear that in mind. But I think it's an idea we have to work with because we'd like as wide a cross-sectional presentation as possible.
I am told that the standing orders of the House does not permit it. The standing orders of the Senate permits it because we amended it. But you still have to, you would have to actually have an amendment to permit that. You can't waive it.
We'll certainly. When necessary part of the program.
You'd have to go through the formality. And it's advisable anyway, though, Minister.
Yeah.
We have found that it has been very helpful in the Senate to be able to have our virtual standing orders meetings.
No, we have to get in line with the modern world. Certainly. The panel will be that permanent, but certainly the idea of utilizing technology to broaden our reach will be part of it. We'll have to make this face-to-face meeting is still very, very, very useful. We are all social creatures, and especially when you don't have these sneeze screens all over the place. But it's the nature of the new order that we'll have to have them. And but we should use it. It does allow for a wider reach and much more efficient use of time sometimes. I'm going to go to some of the names we have had here listed of, again, in a systematic way. So, and if you wish to add any grouping to it for the institutions from Office of the DPP, the law school, JAMBAR, and the sub-bar that is, as one imply, JCF, JDF, Office of the Public Defender, Citizen Security, CSP, Citizen Security, the Secretariat for the Security Plan, Jamaica Social Investment Fund. There's a number of NGOs, including Jamaican for Justice, PMI, and others. Office of the Public Defender have been listed. Churches, right? And it would be of value to list any other group from the university who might be involved. From Western Jamaica, they are very close to the flanker thing, and they do get involved. University of Western is Western Campus. If there are any other big institution you want us to add, it take time, but let us do it and do it now. And then we'll have the broad requests and invite members of the community, especially from the 4 communities that ZOSO have been instituted in. And if we have to stimulate it, we certainly want some Attorney General from the Mount Salem will have gone 3 years, and Denham Town will have gone 3 years. August Town and Greenwich Town still in the very acute phase of, beginning of clear, so to speak. I think they've only gone 60 days, well, under 60 days in both areas. August Town, we have some interest because August Town is a community which I'm one of those who use the term have had intervention overload. There have been all kinds of things happening there and not getting the outcomes we would like. There are a couple of communities in Jamaica like that. August Town is one and Flanker is the other one. They have had anything you can name in terms of intervention and any group you can consider. At one stage, I checked Flanker had, before I got in there, about 25 different organizations claiming they're doing social intervention. And a lot of them are well funded, which is where I have my dispute with my colleagues about how much money you spend on social intervention. And of course, August Town has been there since I was a student. Lambert will say everybody has been working in August Town doing all kinds of things from daycare, nursery, parenting, counseling, name it, and it's been done. So it's a question of what can we do different to ensure we get results. We'll have to ask because it has had enormous amount of resources poured in there, and they seem to get worse rather than better. Well, not so worse in terms of the general condition, but the guys who come out of it and go wild, they get more brutal.
And the reason why I mentioned that, and it goes beyond even the instant case, I see it even in my own area. We make interventions, even in education, but there's no follow-through to ensure that the intervention gives the intended results. We intervene and we leave it there, and it's like on its own momentum. And then another year or so down the road, we measure it and we see we haven't achieved anything. It's not because the idea is bad, but it doesn't have the kind of follow-up and the kind of consistency to make sure that the results that we want to get them. So you can tweak as you go along, but ensure that the desired results is achieved, just like running a business.
One of the advantages of these committees, I find, is the second one I'm doing. No, I did a couple of them from a legislative point of view, is that we can, I think, I'm not saying to any implicate, but I think there's a much more open, frank, and honest discussion as committee leader in the committee members. You get a kind of what I'd call I don't want to say less political, I'm a politician, but a very honest and open discussion on issues. And it's out of that we can make progress in terms of how we're going to approach these issues and deal with them. Because we really have had challenges, where a lot of things are being done and we're not getting the outcome. The follow-up and the institutional rearrangement is critical. And we may even have to look at some of the institutions. For example, schools. We don't need to put in law, but maybe we should make it facilitate the ministry, for example, in a big zone, for example, in one of in what we call the Southern Cross Center, the carpet area. Maybe we should if we can't get it by reason, and the AG spoke of regulation, that the ministry begin to look for contracting education leaders in these areas. In other words, you look for because some of these schools are small because they have been neglected. You end up with weak institutions because you have weak teachers who not going anywhere else. They're not concerned, but they just stay there and fall into a system. The principal who goes there is one who may be not getting a principal job elsewhere. Some are good, some are weird. And you maybe should allow that in these areas because of the chronic nature of the problem. The ministry set standards and have the education institution, for want of a rather city, be put on some kind of measurable parameters, even if you have to pay them better as well, because these are difficult areas. And I think there's no reason why we shouldn't put extra resources in these communities where we're having the problem from. The cost of crime, we say, is 5% of GDP. If we measure it, because we are failing to provide quality education in this area, justifies saying, look, for the following schools, we should do A, B, C, D. So, because this is where I failed to command it. I mean, not to take over, I had 2 schools in my constituency which were in areas like these. We got 2 principals by virtue of resignation, same time. One, I thought, was an excellent teacher, a lady came up on. In the 4-year period, the school was transformed. We moved from under 40% district numeracy at grade 4 to 100%. And all students, including boys, were being placed in high schools of choice, first or second. The other one, the principal just was a dud. And I don't get no response. And we offer the same condition there, able to provide uniforms, 3 lunch, 5 days a week to everybody. And it just didn't get anywhere in terms of creative response. They got some prizes from a few students, but the institutional change did not come. And we had the same input from JSIF, rebuilding facilities. We didn't have, in fact, the one where he was working had JSIF doing a lot of work. The other one was just general government input. So there are a number of issues to be looked at. Because what we need to do is decide that once we move into zones of special operation, we need some outcome. It doesn't matter what is happening. Outcome must be improvement in the life of the community and increase public safety. That's the bottom line. And how we get there, we need to lay the foundation for it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Just to agree with you on the comments made about the fact that these committees do allow for honest discourse and to acknowledge that the most recent one I would have served on was the Joint Select Committee looking at the BOJ Act, which led to almost a non-debate of the bill when it came to the senators. There was wide agreement on the clauses and the amendments that would have been made. Also, to associate myself with the comments of Member Jackson in terms of looking at how we entrench the baseline information in the declaration so that it's easier to track whether it's done through an amendment or a change to the forms. And I'm not married to the method, but to agree that baseline information should be required by the law in a particular manner that is shareable. And just one other point, Mr. Chairman, I believe that we should invite the varying social intervention committees to make presentations to us, because whereas we've seen certainly best practice, the one in Mount Salem worked very, very well, we know the other ones that would have given, or the other interventions that haven't quite borne the fruit that we want. And to avoid, I think, in future, the type of intervention you'd have had to make last week on the one in West Kingston, to really look at how it's working and how it's not working, and if there are any amendments to any amendments required for how it's actually brought together and how it's monitored. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, member, look, let me make another job, and maybe since I've been wearing two caps now, not on the minute that I security, but in the constituency with a number of these areas. One of the things that I'd love to examine in here, because I think where some of the committees have failed, and even I think it succeeded in Monzica, it's a smaller area, but the Member of Parliament afterward got very involved. And I think there's a tendency when we're doing these programs in difficult communities to kind of seek to sideline the political directorate. And I think in these difficult communities, we have this stigmatize them as garrisons, but they just mean that they have strong support for one party or the other. But the political parties can play a significant role in these areas, because generally speaking, if you go in the community, the only two institutions that have any kind of widespread contact are the churches and the political parties. The NGOs don't know how to go in there, and if they go in there, they don't have any broad connection. And certainly, I mean, it's just, I've said I had a meeting with the West Kingston team, and I'm going to go in the Greenwich Farm meeting with the team down there. And certainly, Ms. Brownberg must play a role in this down there, because we find that the tendency is when you're funded by international agencies to almost isolate. We deal with the government, but when you get to the base, nobody's involved. I don't see any reason why I shouldn't, because this is where I think people in the community who are providing leadership, legitimate leadership, are sensitive to the problems and are willing to bring them forward even quicker at that level. So without giving them a formal role, I think we have to say all the legitimate community leaders in the community must be involved in resolving the process. If they fail, then they'll be held accountable. But we do have to look at how we can use everything cannot be legislated. Leadership has to play a role, but we have to look at how we can engage, create appropriate legislative framework to ensure that everybody who should participate is allowed to participate and can be held accountable. Because that's where it comes down.
Chairman, I hear you saying we need an inclusive approach. Everybody who can help to make the communities better. Politicians, church, should be involved. I'm getting the sense inside the committee that we are prepared to move towards an outcome-oriented approach to the bill, and that the discourse that we're going to have is how can we ensure the best outcome, because it's easy to pump money after money after money. It's easier to involve everybody, but if we don't set outcomes, I think it's a point Member Jackson was making earlier, if we don't know what is the objective, we will never achieve it, because we won't be measuring the right things. We'll be just measuring that we pump 14 billion more, rather than measuring the outcomes. And so we're going to have to set outcomes, and maybe in the bill we have to find a way. It can't be in the bill. We have to point to the fact that that's what our concern is about, to transform the communities, and these are the signs that constitute a transformed community. So it allows to deal with the issue of the ending, the revocation of the ZOSO, but more importantly, that we'll have built a sustainable program in the communities that with or without ZOSOs, it doesn't go back to the dance. And that's why I understand. So if the issue for us is outcome-oriented and we're making that clear, then you're going to find in this committee greater unity. And I think Senator Samuda is absolutely correct. When we take the approach of a giant select committee to examine these things, be it sexual harassment, be it Bank of Jamaica, be it OSHA, the best of the parliament comes out and the Jamaican people benefit from us. They don't see that often enough, where we work together across party lines to achieve things. Too much SC is a Tuesday and the Friday sometimes, Matthew, right? Sometimes on Fridays, where we are at loggerhead, rather than when we come together in these giant select committee, fashion the best we can, based now on this bill, outcome-oriented approach.
Clear enough. One of the virtuous point that he made is that of frankness. That once we are frank with each other, the best can come to the surface.
I made the point we have honest discussion in these committees, which is really the base of it. And I think it's a good note to go to the next one, because really that's where we're heading. And that's why, Senator, I've said we start by establishing baseline data. So we know where we're coming from. We know what activity, and besides security measures, we say the number of murders and gangsters available. We must know what the quality of the education outcome is, what the public service available in health. You know, in these communities, I said something like PATH. It's small, but it's a good social safety net. You know, they give 5 members of the family, they get a steady income, makes a difference in their life. But you find that social workers don't like to go in the community. So the people who really need PATH are not the one getting on PATH. It's the one who still have a little energy and driving them, they come out and go seek it out for themselves. The very depressed man who sit in the community have just lost. They can to get left behind. So we'll have to design it and work on it. And
yeah, Chairman, can we move to 5D?
I'm going to move now to set the timing which we meet.
5D.
The proposal. Huh? No, well, I think what we do first is that we meet the times available, and then we decide what time frame we want to ask for submissions. I'm looking at Wednesday evening or Thursday morning. Not Thursday. The other time we can look on the Wednesday afternoon. Right? What's the mood of the meeting? Wednesday afternoon, 2 o'clock. Okay. The seasoned member dominates the discussion with his own expression, but I suspect it'll suit the setup. We do Wednesday. Now we're going to reserve a number Wednesday afternoon, you know. So I want the members to book the time now. The other committee is meeting, and the space is limited, so I have to book the time early, so when the next one comes, we have reserved Parliament for Wednesday afternoon.
Chairman, I don't mind we go on Wednesday afternoon, but let us say that we can wrap up this thing in 6 meetings or something like this. I don't want us to continue. Yeah. Right. So we
expect the meeting to last about 2 hours.
Yeah, yes, I understand that, but I'm saying we don't want this to go on at the meetings. Let us project that whoever wants to make submission, that we have 6 meetings.
That when we advertise, we give them a period in which to make the submission.
That's right.
We send documents within 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I'd be advising it by the members.
So we want a report to go back to Parliament within this fiscal year. Okay?
Within what?
Yes, I miss. Yes, by March, man. We meet.
Yeah.
Yes.
We apply ourselves, we can do it. We'll ask the members who are making submissions to, if they wish to add data and appendices for data, they submit it in writing, and when they come, they make a sharp, deliberate presentation within a certain time frame as well. Right? And we circulate the data they give.
Chairman, I don't know if it is anticipated that everyone who makes a presentation or who delivers a submission is going to want to make an oral presentation. Is there a facility for the committee to accept a written submission without the need for the
Yes,
oral
we will. And we circulate them when we get them.
And so it would seem to me that in terms of how quickly we can wrap up the work of the committee, it would really depend on what the volume of those submissions are and that schedule of presentation. I'm not sure if we're in a position to determine that now.
Well, we can't lock off too tightly, but we don't want to go on and on either. So we'll have to look at it. What we do is monitor, we see what comes in. Sometimes in these public issues, although there's a lot of interest, we find that the willingness to commit themselves to make a structured submission goes. I mean, anti-gang could have been one of the things that I thought have brought a lot of attention. Gangs are maybe the biggest single security problem. And except for the government institutions, the participation from outside is very, very low. Most unfortunately. So, you know, we'll have to, once we meet, we discuss as we go along without dragging anything out. All right? We're not going to do that. We need to get something settled so we can proceed to the next budget year. And again, if we need to review 3 years later, we'll do it again. But rather than drag this out for a year, right? We don't want to do that.
Chairman, I want expedition. I want to see us doing it as quickly as possible. But let us not set up ourselves for failure by setting an unrealistic timetable. I can't see necessarily with all the parliamentary matters that will come associated with budget coming in February and so forth, that's not going to clash with some of the things that we have to do. So I just hope...
It's the same staff we're dealing with, one staff. A part of the staff also have a capacity issue.
I was thinking that there's going to be a brand new staff separately for this committee, given the suggestion that we'll be able to do it in February. So having regard for that, let's go for expedition, but let's be realistic and not set up ourselves for failure.
As we proceed, we dialogue and move on. Right? So through the time, we can...
So, Chairman, we could set the start on the 13th, and we could list the entities that we'll invite. We'll give them enough time.
We set up the first 3 Wednesdays.
First 3 Wednesdays, yes.
Okay.
Yes. But could we determine the list of persons, entities we'll invite for at least the first one or the first 2? You had gone through a list earlier on. We could sign off on how many we'll take verbal presentation.
We have, I think the agencies directly involved would respond quicker. We'd love to see the police and the army early. We'd love to see the JSIF very early. Let us see. We'll still write to everyone. If we get responses, we can adjust that. But we'll go for those 3 right up front. Right? JSIF, JDF, and JSIF. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I'm so sorry.
To kind of get on top of them and hear what they have to say, because we'd love to get now some of the I'd love to get us a response from, before we get the individuals that were, the groups that were involved in the communities, especially the 2 first communities. Mount Salem, JSIF really chairs the Social Intervention Committee. Yeah, it would cover both of them. Well, we could invite a committee member from Mount Salem. I think they have a pretty active grouping there, as far as I'm aware. I think it could start early with getting some feedback from the community. And the CSP will be very useful early in the game. We put them the following week. City Security Secretary to give an eye to everybody get a feel of the new structure for executing in, you know, in the intervention program, because JCF will become the all-inclusive.
Minister, I find over time it is always good to have those oversight agencies present when we are having the different actors or participants present. So like JC, for example, I wouldn't want them to just come and make a presentation and they disappear. When the community groups are coming from Mount Salem, from Denham Town, wherever we're invited, that they be present at the time. Because what they're going to speak on, they are the entities that have the continuing involvement with them. And the same tool applied for the JDF and more so the JCF.
Well, I think most of the media, all the media will have a JCF representative.
Okay, fine,
right?
fine.
And what we'll seek the JCF to represent as well.
No, man, fine.
Right?
Chairman, one of the group that I haven't heard mentioned, but they are integral to what takes place in this zone is the Police Federation. With all respect, due respect to the JCF, they represent the men and women who are on the ground, and they may be helpful to us in assessing the conditions and the impact on those bodies, the men and women who must interface with the communities and must keep the peace. So if it is their wish to make a presentation to us.
Problem. They are the UN organization. But in that second week, we'll begin to ask in addition to the CSP program, we have JS ready, and the citizens, but the institutions tend to respond well. I saw the offset DPP and Norman Manley Law School were willing to come pretty early. They did make a significant contribution the last time. They were one of the few that took time out to do the work.
Chairman, I just wonder if for expedition and for efficiency, if we would not be well served by limiting the time in which any particular presentation is made orally. So albeit written submissions are made, and then we would ask them to do a presentation within a certain amount of time. Is that?
That I said if they're making a written presentation, they should send it with appendices and all the data they wish. Right. But when they come for oral presentation, they confine it to maybe 10 minutes. Maybe for the activate like JCF and JCF, 15 minutes. For the smaller agencies who are coming, 10 minutes. Right?
Yes, and then we could then know how many we could take in that session.
And leave some. Right. Minister of Justice, move for adjournment. You know, Minister, they tell me you're always on the way, and you're always on the adjournment as well. Be careful. Huh? Anything else? Huh? Yeah, 2 p.m. on Wednesday.
Chairman, with all due respect, I'm clear about the first sitting on the 13th.
Yes.
I'm not clear about the presenters.
Second one?
And the second one.
Hold on a day.
No, the presenters. No, but there's a following week. It is important that we determine that now so we can serve them notice.
No, well said. No, man, I did just 2 comments there. I'm just looking at something else. I suggest that week we invite some more of the MDAs because take time to mobilize the committee members and invite Norman Manley Law School, DPP, and public defender.
Okay, fine. So that they can be notified in advance.
Yeah.
Because we won't be meeting again until we come on the 13th.
No, the third Wednesday, I'm just looking and I realize we may have an issue because there's a, there's a consensus, national consensus committee. I think Mr. Distant is setting up a meeting for third Wednesday. We'll keep our Wednesday, but we may have to look at that. You're a member of it.
I don't sit there anymore.
The minister can keep the space, but let me check on it. I think that they will deal with that in due course. I don't think, Senator, that
I kind of see the course.
we will miss you from it if you did part, and I'm sure you make valuable contribution as it settles down, you know.
You're an ex-officer.
And I know you have a passport for Portmore, but it doesn't prevent you from sitting at the committee.
Anything I apply for a waiver.
Before you get up, Minister, no, so that we'll do, as suggested, we'll do just to confirm what we're doing. The next meeting, 13th of January. We have identified the team we're looking at visitors. Minister, we are looking at, in the suggestion, and it came from the AG and not Senator, that we'll do a generate notice to the public before Christmas, which says the committee is meeting. We'll be inviting submissions from those who have an interest in it. And then after January, after Christmas, we give a specific notice with time frame, right? So that we say 2 weeks due, but we will not do that specific notice on it, but we'll do a generic notice in December that people who have an interest are sensitized to it. After they drink some sorrow, they'll forget, but they'll remember easily. Thank you very much.
Sir Chair, the 13th at 10.
To all of you, have as good a Christmas. Have a wonderful Christmas. As some say, returning to the original Christmas. Some meditation with family and a little spiritual, of the spiritual type, not the one that you sip on Lambroad. Right? So thank you very much. Wish for you all a healthy and safe period over the season.
My people, my people, my people. Many of us feel concerned or